All right, go for it.
Welcome to Fish Tank Live, presented by Van Horn Law Group and Casabella Design Group. Seth Levitt here. And fellas, normally I would have the toughest podcaster Dan Marino ever played with joining me, but since he tapped out for this one, I think it's been well documented that Juice needed a little bit of break. If I can't have the toughest podcaster that Dan Marino ever played with, we'll just find the guy who caught more damn touchdown passes than any person in the history of the world. Mark Clayton dives into Fish Tank Live. Mark, how you feeling, man?
I'm feeling good, man. I feel so good about being asked to be a co-host to the Fish Tank. I love the podcast, man. Y'all do a great job. So it'd be my pleasure to jump in with you guys.
Well, we love you, and I think you're going to fit in just fine here, Mark. I have a feeling that you're going to fit in just fine, like you've been here the whole time. So great stuff to have Mark Clayton, one of the Marx brothers, hopefully a future Hall of Famer. We'll talk a little bit about that later. A man who certainly deserves to be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame and an absolute Dolphins legend. Of course, speaking of legends, we got the legendary Savak, the producer. I would say the producer to the stars, but star. OJ McDuffie's a star. I happen to be hanging on as well. Of course, the great South Florida Sun Sentinel columnist and the host of Miami Dolphins Deep Dive with Perk. He is Perk. Chris Perkins. Back in.
What's up? What's up?
Can't get
I'm
enough
back,
of
baby. Yeah.
You can't get enough of it. And then the heart and soul of Van Horn Law Group, Chad Van Horn himself. We missed you last week, Chad, but we have to have our legal zone at the end of this thing. You never know what's going on at Perk's condo and what issues he needs to get figured out. So,
man, I watched last week's episode. There were some errors and omissions that I hope we get worked out today, but I'll be taking notes.
Outstanding. Well, we're looking forward to all of that. Grateful to have everybody here. Fellas, we're smiling and we're laughing, but there wasn't a whole lot of that on Sunday. It has been a rough week for Dolph fans. I can't even imagine how rough it's been at the Baptist Health Training Complex. Perk, you've been in and out of there a little bit. I don't even know where to start in a lot of ways, but I will ask this question, and Perk, we'll start with you. How badly do the Miami Dolphins need to bounce back from that performance against the Colts?
Oh, man, look, this is almost a must-win game. There's no such thing as a must-win game in week 2 of the NFL season.
Yeah.
But I just don't think they're going to win in Buffalo on Thursday night. You guys know that Mike McDaniel is 1-6 against Buffalo on a 6-game losing streak, 0-4 in Buffalo. So they need to win on Sunday for a lot of reasons. And the main reason is, look, they didn't look good in Indy, right? They looked unprepared. They looked uninspired. Yeah. So they need to get that taste out of their mouth, get a good taste in their mouth. I still have them as a 9-win team. People have called me foolish. I don't change after one bad game. Anything can happen in the NFL. I've still got them as a 9-win team, and I think they win this week. I really do.
Well, so that's a prediction. Chris Perkins at the top of the show is saying the Dolphins are getting the dub. The Dolphins, I like it. The home opener are getting a dub. So we just heard must-win game. Mark Clayton, have you ever heard of a
nearly must-win?
A nearly must-win?
Nearly must-win.
Okay, a nearly must-win game.
Yeah.
I was going to say, Mark, have you ever heard of a must-win or even a nearly must-win in week 2 of an NFL season?
I've never heard of a nearly must-win, and I really certainly haven't heard of a must-win in week 2. Yeah. But you know what, though, I have to agree with Chris, to say that this is a must-win game. They need to get that taste out of their mouth. But you know what, though, I can't be surprised about the way that they started because, throughout the whole league now, the starters do not play it all in preseason. And, slow starts should be expected for all the teams, really. But even though all of them don't jump out slow, but, when you don't play and get the timing and get the game speed down in the preseason, you can't expect them to just jump right in and be clicking on all cylinders in week 1 or 2.
But the Colts were. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, we watched some teams. We saw that Sunday night game, and that was about as good of a football game as you'd ever see. I mean, that reminded me, and I think this was a year after your final year in Miami, but It reminded me of the 94 opener that we did the documentary about, where Marino throws for 5 touchdowns and Bledsoe throws for 4, and it was just offensive firepower everywhere. So we saw some teams that looked like they were in regular season form. And then, unfortunately, the Dolphins, it wasn't just that they lost. I feel like it was how they lost. Am I wrong about that?
No, I think they didn't look good at all. And like I said, I'm just going to attribute that to the fact that they didn't get enough reps in the preseason. So we'll see, man. This is a good bounce back week right here. They're playing a divisional team in the Patriots, and they need to really get on track, really, because the short week is coming. You got Buffalo looking them in the face.
Yeah. Perk, you were about to jump in there. What are you thinking?
Well, here's my thing is that, offensively, the offense was disjointed because they didn't have a whole lot of time together in the offseason and in training camp.
Yeah.
Tyreek was out with the wrist surgery and then the oblique injury. Aaron Brewer was out for OTAs. Austin Jackson was out for part of training camp. Alec Ingold was out for part of training camp. And so I think you saw kind of that choppy offensive performance. And one thing that really bothered me with the offense was you saw some of those blitzes, the guys coming in and confusing the Dolphins in the pass pro, in the pass protection packages. And that's something that we saw all throughout training camp. And during training camp, I kind of wrote it off to, well, Anthony Weaver is dialing up some great blitzes and that defense is really going to be ready. It was really kind of the offense was not ready. I'll tell you this also, defensively is where my greatest disappointment was with this team, though, because I thought that front seven was going to be ready. I thought that front seven was going to deal some destruction on Daniel Jones and Tyler Warren and Jonathan Taylor, and they didn't. They only had 1 sack. I was surprised there wasn't more pressure on Daniel Jones. Now, look, if you believe Pro Football Focus, they had the Colts offensive line. Well, they had the Colts offensive line as the number 5 offensive line in the NFL preseason. We know Quentin Nelson, the left guard, is a baller, maybe a gold jacket guy. The left tackle, Bernhard Raymond, is very good. But I just thought the Dolphins defense was going to do better. We knew the secondary wasn't going to be good, but I expected more out of the front seven. And then special teams, the running into the punter by Matthew Judon, it allows them to turn that drive into a 17-play drive right before halftime. They convert a 3rd and 8 and a 4th and 2. And so just disjointed offense, disappointing defense, the special teams error. But the defense was my biggest disappointment because I expected that front seven to carry the offense for the first 2-3 games until they could get everything in sync.
Well, it didn't happen. I'm with you. I thought that was the most disappointing thing. I think I sent a tweet out that morning and said I'm looking forward to seeing what that front seven does, and certainly Chop Robinson. I'm a big Chop Robinson guy, but they were just stonewalled. And speaking of that, and I'm going a little off script here, then you hear Bradley Chubb, a team captain, talk about how everybody was freelancing and doing their own thing. How does that happen in week 1? I'm having trouble understanding. And Mark, look, I know you played on the offensive side of the ball, not the defensive side of the ball. And maybe there's more freelancing that goes on the defensive side of the ball. But in week 1, does it just go back to what you were saying? Is that guys didn't play enough in the preseason to be able to follow the script?
Was he talking about the guys on the defense out there?
He was,
just playing playground football.
That's what he said.
You can't play playground football, and because everybody has to really do their job and be right there where they're supposed to be when the play is when the defense is called. Everybody has an assignment. Nobody's out there freelancing, because if people out there, reminds me when I was playing, we had a defensive back, Tim McCarr, that tried to do his own thing in a playoff game, and because I guess he got tired of getting beat out there, so he figured he just blitz on his own. But nobody can be out there freelancing. Everybody has an assignment to do, and it doesn't work well when 1 or 2 people out there freelancing and not doing what they're supposed to do, because the other guys are counting on them to be where they should be so they can do what they want to do. But freelancing, Not in week one.
Right. That's the part I didn't understand. You could see where things are starting to fall apart and players might be losing trust in their coaches and they start to try to do the things they think are going to, but week one, it was just shocking for me to hear that. If Mark Clayton was facing a defense that you noticed was freelancing, how much would you be licking your chops?
Hey, I would be loving it if they were out there freelancing, because they're out there doing their own thing, hoping that they guess right. And I know what we're doing and I'm running my plays according to what's called. So I'm hoping we catch them guessing and they guess wrong, and we make them pay for their bad guess.
and on the flip side of that, and this is going to lead me into something that Chris Perkins just wrote about today. How much would Don Shula tolerate players out there freelancing and not listening to what the coach's game plan was?
Man, I'm sure that they will be on their way out. He'd have probably made them catch a Greyhound bus back from Indianapolis to Miami.
Couldn't even get on the charter.
And yes, and another thing, you were saying that back in week one, back when Dan came back and they were playing the Patriots. I remember that game right there in '94. But you know what, though? You got to remember, Coach Shula coaching then?
Yep.
He's going to have those guys ready. Yeah. If nothing else, if they're not the better team, if we was never the better team, we was the best prepared team. I'll put it like that.
Gotcha. Well, that makes a lot of sense. So I asked that question because Perk, and I put this in the notes, and then I guess I was in your playbook, Perk, because I saw you wrote that column about how does an angry Mike McDaniel handle business. As part of the outrage, and there's a lot of different reasons why fans are upset and frustrated, and it's understandable. I think they go to a place sometimes that is mind-blowing to me, but the frustration and the disappointment, the anger is understandable. But are people mad that Mike McDaniel does not seem mad enough? Is that a real thing?
Yeah, they are. First of all, Mark, I love to hear you reference Tim McKyer because he went to my college, University of Texas at Arlington.
Now it's starting to make sense, Kirk.
That's right. And look, they stopped playing football in like 1984 because nobody went to the games. It was too expensive. They were no good. But I'll call roll for you now. Tim McKyer, Bruce Colley, Cliff Odom, Dexter Bussey. That's where it ends. But that's all right. That's all right, baby. That's right. Wow. The moving mass, baby. Texas Arlington. That's right.
Oh, my God. How about
Believe
that?
it. That's right. But you know what?
Cliff Odoms went to Texas.
I didn't know Cliff Odom went there, too.
Yeah. Cliff Odom also.
I did not
tight
know
end.
that.
I want to know which one of our scouts was sitting there at Texas Arlington, sitting there saying, we're going to get some players out here. Like, which
Before they shut this program down. That's right. Let's get some players.
It took the only two guys worth a damn.
That's it. Yeah, but look, as far as Mike McDaniel, people are pissed that Mike McDaniel doesn't get more angry, and they want to see some more fire. They want to see Mike McDaniel yelling at people. That's not Mike McDaniel's style. And so, I asked players today. I talked to Jalen Waddle, Jalen Phillips, Aaron Brewer, Jordan Brooks, and Kendall Lamb. And I said, what does it look like when Mike McDaniel is mad? Kendall Lamb had the best quote. He said, I don't think Mike would mind me saying this. He's not a big guy, but you can kind of feel his presence when he's upset. And so, Mike is not a guy who's going to yell and scream, but they say by tone, that he's not happy. By his demeanor, that he's not happy. By his body language, that he's not happy. And, look, the one thing that I took away from that is Mike is always real. He doesn't try to pull off some BS fake tough guy thing and cuss and punch a wall and throw a chair, because that's not believable. That's not credible. So he's always himself. Mike is just not he's an Ivy League educated guy and he's got good command of the language and all that kind of stuff. But I was glad to hear that he is who he is. Now, on a personal level, I would like to hear Mike McDaniel gets in somebody's ass and he tells them this will not be tolerated, or else your butt is off of this team. Like, there will be no compromise. You guys remember when Adam Gase in 2016, he cut those 3 offensive linemen, right? And I think it was Billy Turner, Dallas Thomas, Jamil Douglas. And they went on to make the playoffs. Now, they made the playoffs mostly because of Jay Ajayi, but Adam Gase sent a message. And I would look, last year, Mike McDaniel, he did cut David Long, the linebacker, who was a team captain. Yep. He demoted Durham Smythe. He demoted Raheem Mostert. But I was shocked that they came out looking so unprepared and just so uninspired. So I'm hoping that Mike McDaniel drove home the message: this will not be tolerated. This mess ends right here. I hope that's the message that Mike McDaniel drove home in his own way.
Yeah. Well, and so what you just said there is you're hoping, right? Because we really don't know. And that's what I will say this. Everybody gets there's a True Blazer in the chat. It says the OG Dolphin legend in the building, number 83, Mark Clayton. I love it. Good stuff. So having worked for an NFL team, Mark having played, a decade for an NFL team, for 2 NFL teams, and primarily for 1 NFL team, everything that we see externally doesn't mean that's everything that is happening, right? And so you don't necessarily need a guy who's spitting all over himself and stuffing, pictures into referees' pockets and whatever. And just because someone's angry and yelling and screaming, it doesn't necessarily mean they're a good coach or a bad coach. So I don't think that's fair. But I also understand, like, when we get angry, we want to see somebody else get angry, right? We want to see that result. But who was it that said in your article that said that when McDaniel has an issue with someone, he kind of has a private conversation and lets them know how he feels about their play and their performance? Somebody said that in your column.
Aaron Brewer said that.
Okay.
Aaron Brewer said that. And you know what? Let me add this, that one of the most important things that was said was Jalen Phillips said, we respect Mike. Yeah. We still respect Mike. And I think a lot of fans were wondering about that. I think they do like and respect Mike. But you got to start seeing some meaningful victories so you can keep believing, so you can take that belief and that faith to a different level. Because what I've said about the Mike McDaniel teams is they've disappointed and underachieved. I think relative to the talent, they should have a playoff victory. I'm not saying they should have been to a Super Bowl, but they should have a playoff victory. But I do think it was important that Jalen Phillips said, we respect Mike McDaniel.
Yeah. You'd love to hear more of that. If nothing else, it seems like it's a good place to go to work, right? I mean, he's not yelling and screaming at people. He seems to have one of the, I hate to use the word easy, but it seems to be one of the training camps that's less difficult than some of the others that we hear. I know it's different than the 2 and 3 a days that Mark Clayton had to deal with. So he's remembering all those. But Mark, so let me ask you this then. You were a guy that maybe might have caught the ear of a coach here or there. Like, obviously your play on the field was something that everybody fell in love with. But maybe off the field, or maybe in the meeting rooms, or maybe there was a coach or two that might have been frustrated by Mark Clayton from time to time. How did you need to be approached as a receiver? We've established Juice isn't here to defend the receiver position, but we've established that it might be the diva position. How did you, as an outspoken, maybe even outlandish at times wide receiver, handle coaching? What type of a coach did you need that you would respond to?
Well, I can respond to any coaching. I could be coached hard. I don't let my feelings get in the way of them doing their job or me doing my job. I could stand the hard coaching, but you know what? For a coach really just to come up and just undress me verbally, that's not the way to get me going. Because I feel like that you can talk to me in a manner where I'll get your point without you trying to undress me, make me feel bad or look bad. And I really hate it to really be undressed and talked bad about in front of my peers, my team.
In front of the group.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pull me off to the side.
I heard that was Shula's thing, though, right? He would put in front of the whole team.
Well, he
run it back and forth.
He really wouldn't care, but at the beginning, he just like really just used to give it to me. He didn't care who was around, where we were at. But later on in my career, like after I had like 6-7 years, he would call me in his office and he'd do it privately in a more mannerable tone, a lower tone. And I can relate to that. I think he got more out of me when he approached me that way.
So do you think that he figured that was the best? He figured out that was the best way to get the best out of you, or do you think that you kind of earned the right to get the private call out as opposed to the public one?
Maybe both, but I think that he felt like that over the years, though, based on a relationship that we had built, that he felt like that he could just call me in his office and say, "Listen, Mark, you can't really come in the meeting 1 second before the meeting starts. You can't come out on the practice field 1 second before the practice starts. The other guys, the younger guys, are looking up to you, and they feel like that if you come to the meeting or to practice, a minute or 5 seconds before it starts, they feel like that they can cut the corners like that, and they can."
Right, because they're not catching 18 touchdowns this year. Right, I get it.
So
go ahead.
So when he approached me like that, I respected that approach right there. It felt like that, I'm not going to really try to influence the other guys to do what I'm doing because, he's allowing me to really get away with what I'm doing.
Right. So that leads me into, I was going to go in a different direction. There's a question about the offensive line I want to get back to with Perk, but you just described some things that might sound familiar to people who follow this current Miami Dolphins team in terms of a star receiver who might show up to a meeting. Well, in this case, maybe not even 1 second early, but maybe late, who might not show up to practice until after jog and stretch. We've heard these things about Tyreek Hill. Now, that's not necessarily exactly what you're detailing, but we've heard some of these things with Tyreek Hill. I feel like Tyreek had to play the good soldier. He had to serve his penance, didn't he, Perk? Tua talked multiple times about how Tyreek had to kind of win earn everyone's respect back. We heard a lot of different things about Tyreek Hill, and for the most part, he stood up and said, "I need to be a better leader. I need to do this. I need to do that." And about, 9 minutes into the game, he was pissed off and he was fired up on the sidelines. When you see that and you see the way the game's going, you see an interception that he was open, that was a ball that he certainly could have turned into a big game, potentially even a touchdown if it had been on target. When you see that, how much can you relate to Tyreek? Like, can you help us look under the helmet a little bit as a star receiver who's fiery, who's competitive, who also knows how he can help the team because he's had success in the past? How do you handle that kind of frustration? Are we making more out of it than we need to, seeing him blow up on the sidelines? Or is that just a competitor wanting to help the team move forward?
He's a competitor. All of those guys out there, I hope, are big time competitors. But you can't really just blow up on an errant throw because that's going to happen. And he's going to run bad routes. He's going to drop balls. So when it comes down to that right there, man, you just got to go ahead and go over to Tua. Hey, my man, come on, man, let's go. Try to encourage him because he's not out there trying to throw interceptions on purpose. He's out there trying to do the best job he can do, and just like all the other players out there on offense, because it takes all 11 guys out there doing their jobs for a play to be successful and to execute the play. But I'm gonna go back a little quick. I never was late. I was never late to meetings. I was never late to planes. I never missed a practice. I was always there when called upon. I was always.
If it was an 8 a.m. meeting, you were there at 8 a.m.
That's right.
Okay.
Never missed, never late. But
Chad Van Horn let the record show Mark Clayton was never late to a meeting or a plane.
Noted. And some of those antics that Tyreek was doing last year, he can't do that. He had that C on his jersey, man. A captain cannot be doing those things that he was doing.
So that part right there, that C needs to mean something. I agree with that wholeheartedly. So Perk, earlier you were talking about the lack of continuity during the off season and during training camp, I should say. And I know there's been a lot, like, I don't know that we ever saw in training camp the 5 starting offensive linemen all on the field at the same time during the practice, right? I think that was
that's correct. That's correct.
And we saw it for 3 plays. So on one hand, like I find that problematic, but on the other hand, maybe it just prepared them for exactly what we were going to get, because it looks like we might only have 3 of the 5 coming up against New England.
Yeah, and the big problem to me with that is the backups are the worst I've seen in the McDaniel era. Now, if they could have rolled with the 5 starters, okay, I'm good with that. I don't like what they did with the backup offensive line. I love that they went out and got Jonas Savaiinaya and James Daniels. But, if you look at James Daniels, he had the left ankle injury before the game, and then he had the pec injury during the game. Last year, he had the Achilles injury, so it's been a rough go for him. I feel bad for him because he seemed like a good dude the couple of times that I met him. I'm concerned about this offensive line. I really am, and I'm concerned about how they're going to be able to communicate with each other for the blitz pickups. And look, Austin Jackson, the right tackle, he's probably their best run blocker. So you guys remember last year when he went out, the run game took a little bit of a dip. Now, Alec Ingold went out for a couple of games also, the fullback. But when Austin went out, that run game took a little bit of a dip. In the bigger picture, I wish they would have run the ball a little bit more early in the game. I did ask Mike McDaniel today how much the deficit, the scoreboard, affected the strategy of using Ollie Gordon. And he said, yeah, that was a problem. But just getting back to offensive line, they've got some work to do. They really do. And, Keon Smith, who filled in at right guard, I talked to him today. He's taken, he used to wear that big knee brace. He was out all last year, I believe, with an MCL injury. He was wearing a big knee brace for most of the year, and I was for most of training camp. And I was like, Keon, I noticed that knee brace is gone. He was like, yeah, he said, my knee is fine. And I think it was a mental thing that I was worried about that knee too much when that brace was on there. So we'll see what happens with Keon. I was kind of surprised they didn't go with Daniel Brunskill in there at the right guard position. Yeah. For the last couple of weeks in training camp, I only saw Keon at left tackle. I think they were trying to get him ready to be a backup left tackle. But, you have that injury right in the game, and Keon comes in. So we'll see what happens. We'll see how much faith Tua has in that offensive line. Harold Landry for the Patriots, the linebacker, he had 2.5 sacks last week in their season opening loss to the Raiders, that 20-13 loss. So you're going to have to look out for him. But hopefully that offensive line under Butch Berry, the offensive line coach, can get some stuff worked out, because I'm more worried about communication than actual performance.
Well, performance ultimately is what I'm worried about. I understand your point. But damn it,
it's about performance, right?
I don't care how they communicate. Just block the people in front of you, man.
I agree with you, Seth, because Chris, you hit the nail on the head. The offensive line has been a very concerning unit for me for the last maybe 2 or 3 years, really. When they was lighting it up in 23, they were, I think, at their best right there in 23. But last year, and I've always been concerned about their offensive line, and I felt like that if you went out and you signed your franchise quarterback, make sure that you can protect them, because they saw what can happen to them if Tua is not available for them.
Right. No, they have to keep him upright and healthy. But, and I want to talk about Tua here in a second, but Boxing Bill says, Mark Clayton, my favorite receiver of all time, electrifying, absolute legend. We agree with you, Boxing Bill. Raphael, freaking legend. I thought he's talking about you, Perk, but he's actually saying Mark Clayton. So, yeah.
How do you know it? How do you know it's Mark and not me?
Well, he wrote it here. Okay, all right. He did make it really quickly. I thought it was you at first, but he did make it really clear.
It could be you, Chris. It could be you.
We know it wasn't. We know it wasn't Mark, but I appreciate
Mark, we
that.
heard. So last week, Chris told us that it could have been him, but then he jumped on a motorcycle as a kid once after his mother told him not to, and she pulled him right off the football team, and he had to pick up a pen after that. He never got to play ball again. So don't mess with Mama Perkins for
That's
sure.
That's it.
it's kind of amazing that we've been doing this for 31 minutes and we've yet to mention Tua Tagovailoa. And, maybe the worst performance of Tua's professional career. I mean, it was rough. And it wasn't, look, the line had its issues. Everybody had their issues. Pass pro from the running back. I mean, it was, as we talked about ad nauseum already today, it was just a very difficult performance to watch from top to bottom. Maybe there was one or two players that graded out okay. Patrick Paul apparently graded out pretty well, but it was just rough. But Tua, you need your best players, your captains, your franchise quarterback to be that dude. Had 3 turnovers. He got asked the question after the game, Perk, by Omar Kelly about turnovers in bunches, and he took issue with it to the point where he said it was crazy to say that. And then Hal Habib doubled down today and asked him about it. And he's like, look, I don't want to turn the ball over, but like it does not seem like something that Tua wanted to talk about. Are we getting close to Salty Tua? Because sometimes Salty Tua is when he gets the S on his chest.
Oh, Salty Tua is my favorite version of Tua, quite honestly. So I love to see Salty Tua. So I hope we do get to that version of Tua. But I will say this. I think post-game, I think Tua kind of misunderstood the question. I don't think he really understood what Omar was asking. And I know, and Mark, you can talk about this also. After the game, especially after a performance like that, you're kind of amped up. You don't want to hear any BS from the media, any questions about, right. And so I think he was a little defensive, and I think he misunderstood the question. Tua's always been great with us. He really has. So I think that was a case of him misunderstanding the question. But man, you can't have 3 turnovers leading to 17 points, 2 touchdowns and a field goal. Tua knows that. I'll talk about this later on I tried to tell y'all, but I think the big thing to me, one of the big things to me was, Tua and Tyreek, that on-field relationship, Tua didn't play the last 2 games because he was hurt. The previous 2 that we saw them together was San Francisco and Houston. We know Houston was 3 interception performance. 2 of those balls going to Tyreek and Derek Stingley got in the way. So the last 2 games that they played together, Tyreek was 9 for 105. That's a 2-game total, and it was 20 targets and only 9 receptions. Something was a little bit off, and then you go through the offseason. I know. And then you go through the offseason, and Tyreek has the wrist surgery, and then he has the oblique. When they got together on Sunday, that was the first time since December 22nd they had been together in a competitive situation. There was no joint practice, no preseason. So I think there was rust in that relationship. I can't explain the rest of Tua's, but not holding on to the ball and fumbling. But yeah, he's got to be much, much better.
Mm-hmm. I agree because as I've noticed throughout the years, when Tua throws has an early turnover, I think he gets down on himself. He doesn't look like he's as confident as he was at the start of the game. But once he throws a first pick or has a turnover or whatever, then he doesn't look like he has that same swagger to me, throughout the game. And then when he comes right back and has another turnover, he's really down on himself. Then where, the guy's got to go over there as opposed to Tyreek going over there belly aching, complaining and stuff. Man, you got to pick your guy up, man. You got to learn to go over there and say, it's going to be all right, And another thing, I think that, they forced the ball to Tyreek too much to me. I mean, really.
I know you and Dupe are counting targets over there, Mark. I've heard about you guys.
The ball to him just way too much, man. I know he's a weapon, and they want to utilize and take advantage of that weapon right there. But they have other guys that are just as capable of making big plays as he is. And then sometimes we all want to be the primary target all the time when the play is called. But sometimes you're going to have to play the dummy. The clear out guy, right. It's me and Duke had to do it all the time. He was the intended target, and I have to go and make sure I clear it out and make sure that nobody's in the middle. So if he's coming across the middle, he can catch the ball without getting knocked in the mouth. But man, these guys got to utilize these guys, skillfully to their skills.
Hey, Mark, let me tell you something though. But here's one of my favorite stats, or one of my most telling stats, because I've always said that this offense is about two things: Tyreek Hill and the threat of Tyreek Hill. So over the last two seasons and one game, they are 11-0 when Tyreek has 100 or more yards, 7-17 when he has 99 or fewer. Mark, this offense was just built so much around Tyreek, and when they can't get the ball to him, it's a major problem. Now, I think a physical, aggressive run game would help, but that's a huge imbalance there, right? I mean, what do you think about that? 11-0 and 7-17, Mark. What do you think about that number?
I think that the opposing teams, they know that they're aware of that statistic as well.
Right.
So they know if they can keep him up under 100, they got a chance to win the game. Right. And they know that if they go ahead and really just put all their focus on him and get the pressure on Tua where he's got to hold the ball. If they get it where he has to hold the ball, I'm sure that they feel good about their chances getting to him because, we all know he's not the most mobile quarterback out there in the league. And they feel like if they can get him to hold the ball for an extra second or two and come off that first read and go to a second and third progression, then I'm sure they feel very confident that they're going to get to Tua. And if they take Tyreek out of the game and let somebody else beat them, I'm sure that they're feeling very good about their chances of winning the game because they're aware of that stat too, just like you said, Chris.
Yeah. And you know what, Seth, and we all heard the Xavier Howard comment, right? That when Tua can't get his first read, he goes into panic mode. That's another thing I'm sure other teams are aware of.
It looks like it too, though. It looks like it.
Yeah.
See, that's not good.
That to me.
That's not good. That's not good to hear Xavier Howard say that, which obviously he's seen enough practice and been on he's seen enough film. He's been with the Dolphins, so he's seen it from both sides of the table now. And for Mark Clayton to sit there and say that's what I see as well. And look, Mark, you played with one of the most confident human beings I've ever met in my entire life, on or off the field, right? Dan Marino's got a lot of things going for him, but his confidence might be even more impressive than that right arm of his.
And like I tell people, I feel like I had, I was the most competitive person out there until I ran into Dan Marino, and he is just as competitive or even more competitive player than I was because we want to win at all times, all the time.
Yeah, well, you were a confident guy too. I remember the story you told us on the fish tank. The draft night, you were convinced you were going to be in the first round. Now we ended up getting you 7 rounds later, but you were convinced. You were suited and booted.
Yeah, I was convinced because it was only 3 receivers in Division I football my senior year to catch for 1,000 yards, and me, Henry Ellett, and a kid from UNLV. Yeah, I thought I was going to go in the first round, even though I didn't get a chance to play in the Senior Bowl, the East-West Shrine game, and got invited to one combine, and they had 2 combines at that time. Yeah, I thought I was going in the first round.
Well, damn it. They do these redrafts now. You should have. So we've got Boxing Bill is asking, Mark, what was your vertical?
I had about a 38, 39-inch vertical.
38, 39-inch vertical. That's getting it done. Yeah. Oh boy. Sam is back in the chat. We tracked him down. Dolphins week 1 were basically the awkward middle school kid who woke up late for the first day of school. So they just rolled in with their PJs on and their bedhead. Well, I mean, that's one way to describe it, Sam. I guess that geez. That's that sounds
like a good analogy.
Right. That's not the way you want your favorite team to be described, though, is it?
No. But that's all right. That was week 1. They're going to get it together week 2. That's week 1 of 17. So they're going to get it together this week.
I hope you're right. All right. I want to shift gears. Since we're talking, I guess, about middle school kids, I want to shift gears to some name calling that we heard this week on a national level. So, look, when you put a performance out there like that, there's going to be criticism. But then Rex Ryan comes out on Get Up and says he calls him McGenius or whatever they call him, and then he drops a nerd boy on us. Did Rex Ryan cross the line? Do you got, I said something about it on Twitter. I know that Ryan Clark earlier had said something about a non-player and Peter Schrager, and everybody went nuts and thought Ryan Clark should be fired, which I thought was crazy. Juice reminds me I'm a non-player all the time when we did post-game or whatever. Like, we have different perspectives. I could watch the game. I could study the game. I could work around professional athletes my whole life. I'm never going to understand or look at things the way Mark Clayton does. It's just, to me, that I don't see that as an insult. Nerd Boy was clearly intended to be an insult. How do you guys feel about that? A guy who was a head coach, who actually had that job on 2 different occasions, had to suffer through getting fired on 2 different occasions. He's throwing shots at somebody else, calling him Nerd Boy. What are you guys' thoughts?
I think it's easy. It's easy to throw shots when you're not on that sideline. He was been over there before, and he wasn't the best coach out there either. So, or he would still be coaching. So for him to start throwing jabs right there, everybody wants to be the genius behind the mic when they're not on the sideline. But everybody has their opinion. So Mike, I'm sure he didn't even let that affect him at all. So
I hope not. It affected me though. I felt it. Perk, what did you think? I mean, you're a member of the media. I guess technically we all are right now, but you are officially a credentialed member of the media. What did you think about that?
I thought Rex crossed the line. You shouldn't do any name calling. I try not to ever make it personal. I try to keep a level of professionalism. And I know nowadays with social media and podcasts, you got to have a take and you got to get clicks and you got to get likes and retweets. Bump all that mess. Try to, be a human being, be a decent person, and have respect for the hard work that somebody else had to put in to get to that level. Rex is a man who was in that position in New York. Like, what are you doing, Rex? Like, you got to be better than that. I lose respect for people when they do the name calling thing and make it personal. I try very, very hard not to make it personal. I've seen guys get to the pros on different levels. Kellen Mond, who was a quarterback drafted in the 3rd round in 2021 from Texas A&M, me and his dad have been best friends since we were 12 years old. So I saw Kellen come up. He was a 5-star recruit. He went to IMG. He was going to go to Baylor. He ended up going to Texas A&M, 3rd round pick. He bumped around the league. He's out of the league now, which is another form of tells you how tough it is to stay in the league. But it's hard. It's hard to make it into the league, and everybody who makes it into the league has a whole community around them, right? It does take a community, and anybody who was a friend of a friend of a friend of yours and saw you at a high school dance. Oh, I know Mark Clayton. Yeah, I saw him at a dance once, and I just have so much more respect for pro athletes. I really try hard not to make it personal. Rex crossed the line. I know they do that on ESPN, but I lose respect for people who do that. I really do.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I know you're not supposed to say this in a Dolphins space, but I like Rex Ryan. I think he was fun. He was fun to watch when he coached. JT, when he played for the Jets, absolutely loved him. He thought he was a great guy. He's entertaining. He does cross certain lines, but I just thought that was beneath him, I think is the best way that I could describe it. So just wanted to know what everybody's thoughts were here. And the fact that was not, people weren't bothered by that as much as they were by Ryan Clark calling somebody a non-player. I think that says more about what they think about Ryan Clark, I guess. I don't know. I'm a Ryan Clark fan, but I thought that was pretty surprising. So last thing I want to ask before we get into, I tried to tell y'all, I think at this point, and actually Savak tried to tell us that the Darren Waller experiment was just that, was an experiment. So, Kurt, have you ever heard an answer like this today? So I don't know who asked the question about Darren. Who asked the question?
I can't remember. I think it might have been Barry Jackson.
Seems like a Barry question for sure. And he said, what do we expect? He said, I have learned to expect. What did he say? I expect that I won't expect. Now I can't even remember. What did he say? I expect to not know what to expect.
Yeah.
And then ultimately said we may have to move on in the best interest of the team. I was kind of shocked to hear that.
Well, I think that what he meant was they didn't want to, because he said something about the rest of the season. I think what he meant was we don't want to sacrifice the rest of the season rushing him out there for week 2. I think that's what he was getting at. Yeah, I think that's really what he was getting at, as opposed to Waller sitting out the whole season. But look, this Waller thing, it's bringing up ugly memories, right? Of OBJ, of Shaq
Raphael
Barrett.
just said OBJ equals Waller in the chat. So,
yeah, I know.
Will Fuller? Do we have Will Fuller at least saw the, he did see the field.
He did see the field, but it's going down that road. And, this is what is Waller, 33, 32 or 33? And
did not play football since 2023.
Yeah, it's just, I thought they were unprepared for the loss of Jonnu Smith. And I think that's really what this stems from, that you traded Jonnu and then you really didn't have a backup plan. You had Zach Ertz in there for an interview. You probably should have signed him. I know that Waller has a history with Frank Smith, the offensive coordinator. But, man, I mean, I just, the whole Waller thing of he's not in football shape. Well, how the hell do you get in football shape without playing football? And, Iffy Melifonwu came in and he was on the non-football injury list, and they slowly integrated him in where he was doing a little bit of 7-on-7. Then he did a little bit of 11-on-11. I thought that's what they were going to do with Waller. I'm starting to think this hip injury was a pre-existing condition, because Mike McDaniel has a couple of times said a setback, and we're like, a setback from what? Like what, you can't just have a setback. You have to have an original injury.
Well,
so
it was a setback on the day that he was determined he wasn't going to practice. Like, that was in our efforts to avoid a setback. We had a setback. That was another great one. I mean, if you pull all the quotes about Darren Waller, they're unbelievable. Sam just said Scooby-Doo Darren Waller and rip off the mask to reveal who he really is, Will Fuller. That one's pretty good. What about Salt Hill? Mark, love watching you with Duper and Marino. Had a sweet triple auto football card of you guys. So a lot of, not surprisingly, a lot of fans here for Mark Clayton.
So to make a quick comment about Waller, I didn't like that move when they brought him there, because I felt like he was sitting on the couch for a year.
Yeah,
you can't dang on get off the couch all comfy and cozy, sitting down there and expect him to be ready to go back out there for the grind of the NFL.
Yeah,
and if you didn't have a plan after you were considering trading Jonnu Smith, then that means you never should have gotten rid of him.
Yeah,
that's
fair. And I've said,
when they traded him for a bag of chips, I said, come on, man.
Hold on, Mark. Minka Fitzpatrick's not a bag of chips, man.
No. That trade right there, they traded Minka for Jalen Ramsey.
Yeah,
and they traded Jonnu Smith for a bag of chips, a 6th-round pick.
Was it at least like blue Doritos or something? Like, what kind of chips were?
Yeah, some Cool Ranch.
No, that's plain Lays.
Some plain Lays.
I love it.
Oh my God! But no, man. I thought Jonnu Smith was really going to have a great year had he stayed down with the Dolphins.
Yeah.
But I don't know the reason why they traded him. But I don't think they got enough for their trade.
Yeah, I understand that. Look, and I was in agreement. I didn't think redoing his contract was the right move. I know that's not a pro player take, but I just felt like he had just signed a 2-year deal. He did have a great season, but he was 30 whatever years old, and I just didn't see why they needed to redo his contract. But if they were going to trade him, you're right, have a plan. I hate that they traded away that 4th-round draft pick, because I still, whether it was Rondé Gadsden's son, I just feel like there were some tight ends still available in that 4th round that could potentially no jalapeno Cheetos. Too funny. So, all right, before we get every chip, well, we're going to get it now. Before we get every chip in the book here in the chat, although go ahead in the chat, tell us what your favorite chips are. I think it's time to move on to our new favorite segment here on Fish Tank Live. I want to hear that I tried to tell y'all. I know I normally kick it off, but I'm going to toss this one to Chris Perkins. We'll go Perk, Clayton, and then I tried to tell y'all as well. Perk, what do you got for us?
All right. I tried to tell y'all that this Tua to Tyreek relationship was going to take time. And we saw, like I said, these guys were rusty the last time that we saw them, which was the San Francisco game, which was the Houston game. After the Houston game, y'all remember, this is when Tyreek came out with the I need more practice time with Tua. Well, they haven't had any practice time really since then. And it's a relationship that fuels this offense. And along with that 11-0 and 7-17, when they were 11-0 with Tyreek getting 100 or more yards, they averaged 35 points a game. 7-17, they were averaging 18 points per game. Why? Because Tyreek opens it up for everybody else, because he draws so much attention that he opens it up for everybody else. What I wish would have happened in the offseason and Sunday was that the run game takes over. And I know that they tried to do that by getting Jonas Abayinaya and James Daniels and Alexander Madison and Ollie Gordon, but they got behind so often we weren't able to see that run game. But my other contention with that is we didn't see that run game all throughout training camp, all throughout joint practices, all throughout preseason games. We didn't see that running game pounding the defense, knocking them off the line of scrimmage, establishing a physical presence. I think this run game is too finesse. I've always thought that the run game was too finesse under Mike McDaniel. So, look, until they can figure out how to get the Tua to Tyreek connection going, and I think it's just going to take time, this offense is going to struggle. And I'll say this also, when I talk about the 11-0, you guys know that in 2023, Tua to Tyreek had 8 100-yard games. Yep. Last year, they only had 2 100-yard games. Tyreek's last 100-yard game was with Snoop Huntley against Cleveland, because Cleveland was stupid enough to play single high safety, and so they went to school on him. But, they've got to figure out how they can get this Tua to Tyreek connection on the fast track. Otherwise, you better get that run game going, or else you're going to be scoring 1 and 2 touchdowns a game. They got to get that connection going or find some other way to score touchdowns.
There it is. Chris Perkins coming strong with I tried to tell y'all. Mark Clayton was all for it. He was all for it. Well, Mark, here it is. You know, we're just throwing you in the deep end with this thing. You're up. What did you try to tell us?
I try to tell y'all that as long as these guys don't get reps in preseason games, expect more of this slow start that you got from week 1. Because you cannot simulate the speed of a game in practice. So until these guys get out there on the field with each other and play at game speed, then they're not going to be ready for when the game does start and they're playing at game speed. And, and you need to work on your timing in practice to make sure that you are timed up in the games. So, more work on the practice field and more work during the games, in the preseason games, or expect what you got in week 1, and they may not get it together because they still won't have it down.
Well, don't tell us we're going to get that again, Mark.
2 or 3 weeks in mind, but based on the fact that I'm going to be at the game Sunday, so I expect to see a victory.
Okay. Okay. Well, you just dropped one on us. If you didn't know and you're going to the game, keep your eyes peeled, because you might just catch Mark Clayton running around the stadium. So you tried to tell us more practice, we'll get something better. If we don't have more practice, that's what we're going to get. I'm going to hit my tried to tell y'all here in a second. If you're still here with us in the chat, go ahead and drop your legal questions. Chad Van Horn's going to ask a few legal questions. I think Perk has one for you as well, Chad, that pesky homeowners association that he's dealing with over there. But we'll deal with that. So look, I was going to talk about the game, but I feel like we've talked about it ad nauseum. I'm ready to move forward. So this is what I tried to tell y'all over and over and over again. I tried to tell y'all that Mark Clayton belongs in the Hall of Fame. Put that man in the damn Hall of Fame already. His 84 touchdown catches are more than 21 of the 35 wide receivers in the Hall of Fame. So, Perk, you're the math guy here. That's 60%. He's got more touchdown catches than 60% of the wide receivers who are in the Hall of Fame. Why is he here sitting with us right now? Okay? Mark Clayton scored a touchdown every 6.9 times he caught a pass. Now, if you take every Hall of Famer that has caught 75 or more touchdowns, because if you're in the Hall of Fame, you only caught 40 touchdowns. That's a whole other conversation that we need to have. But if you caught 75 or more touchdowns, you're in the Hall of Fame. There's only the only guys who have a better touchdown to reception ratio are Paul Warfield, who's the greatest of all time when it comes to that, Randy Moss, who is pretty flipping good as well, and Lance Allworth. That's it. Not Jerry Rice, not T.O., not Chris Carter, not Isaac Bruce. All those guys, they do not have a better touchdown per reception ratio than Mark Clayton. Why is Mark Clayton not in the Hall of Fame? There's only two players in the entire decade of the 1980s who caught more touchdown passes than Mark Clayton in the 80s. Steve Largent, and he only caught 6 more than Mark. But guess what? Perk, he played in 38 more games than Mark Clayton.
Yeah.
Why is Mark Clayton not in the Hall of Fame? Somebody make sense, because I can't make any sense out of it. Mark, you had 4 seasons of double-digit touchdown receptions. That is 3 times as many than 15 Hall of Famers who are Hall of Fame wide receivers. So Michael Irvin, Andre Reed, John Stallworth, James Lofton, Andre Johnson, who we love down here in Miami. None of those guys had more than 1. Some of them didn't have any double-digit seasons with double-digit touchdowns. Mark Clayton had 4. So this is an issue for me. And then this one, I can't let this one go, Mark, unless you want me to stop. You want me to stop, Mark, or are you good? Can I go on?
Do your thing, Seth.
Mark Clayton. Well, I tried to tell y'all that his 18 touchdown receptions are being overlooked. That record 17 touchdown receptions was established 42 years prior. That it stood for 42 years before Mark had 18 touchdown receptions in 1984. And in the 40 years since he did that, it's only been equaled twice. And it was equaled by Sterling Sharp, who's now in the Hall of Fame, and Devontae Adams, who has a good chance of getting in the Hall of Fame, and only 2 people have surpassed it. And their names are Jerry Rice and Randy Moss, arguably the 2 greatest receivers in the history of the game, if you're not counting Paul Warfield. So again, that's only happened 4 times in the 40 seasons since Mark had 18 touchdowns. Why are we even talking about this? I don't get it. And Perk, I'm going to put this on you. I'm not putting it on you, but I have a question for you.
Yep.
Because when it comes to what happens on the field, or when it comes to respect from his peers, Mark Clayton is a Hall of Famer. But if you look at any category that is determined, and I'm not hating on the media because the process is the process and I respect it. But if you look at any category like All Pros, if you look at any category like All Decade, if you look at any category like the Hall of Fame, if someone else is determining Mark's greatness, that's where he falls short. And so that's where I find problematic. Like someone said, well, he's never been a first team All-Pro. How could he be a Hall of Famer? I'm like, he had 18 touchdowns. He broke a 42-year-old record, and he wasn't voted first team All-Pro. Maybe the voting system was flawed and not the performance. I tried to tell y'all, Mark Clayton should be in the damn Hall of Fame. Let's get him in there. All right, let me stick up for Armando. Someone just said, is Armando still the Hall of Fame nominator for the Dolphins? Armando does have a Hall of Fame vote, but Mark is now in the seniors committee, and Armando is not on the seniors committee. So he does not have any dog in the fight other than to whisper in people's ears how great Mark Clayton was. So that's what I tried to tell y'all. I hope that it'll happen sooner than later. And then I can really try to tell y'all, see, I told y'all. That's our segment right there. Oh, man, we're getting all kinds of stats.
Strong.
Well, I had to be prepared. How often are we going to get Mark Clayton here in the Fish Tank Live? So we're thrilled to have him here. All right, wait, hold on. The problem is the senior group. By understanding how it works, yes, that is a challenge because less players have an opportunity in the seniors group, and it's a smaller group of selectors. Dolphins talk. Mike says Mark Clayton has 16 more touchdowns than Art Monk, and Monk played in 66 more games. If Monk is in, Clayton should be in. Boom, production matters. So it seems like the people in the chat agree with me, Mark, and apparently agree with you as well.
I appreciate them, man. But if it's meant to be, it shall be. I'm
Fair enough.
I'm not going to worry about what ifs and ands, because if it's supposed to happen, it shall happen. If God says the same.
It should happen. It should have happened already.
You're damn right. It definitely should have happened, and it is meant to be, so I hope it will be soon. Shout out to our guy Alvaro. So I got to say this. The Fish Tank, as you know now, is presented by Van Horn Law Group, and Chad's here with us. And then Alvaro Freitas of Casabella Design Group is 30,000 feet in the air. He's flying somewhere right now. He says, ugly start for the Fins. Thank God the Fish Tank actually showed up. We're always going to show up, Alvaro. You know it, damn it. That's exactly right. All right. I need your legal questions. We've got a few more minutes here. Chad Van Horn has been patient. He's been ready. He's been taking notes. I think he's filed a cease and desist to Perk already for using that let's dive in. So, okay, what's one area of bankruptcy law? So Maria says, Chad, what is one area of bankruptcy law you think will change the most in the next 5 years?
Yeah, and thanks for bringing me in. And I've been drafting actually the complaint against the Hall of Fame voters, so that's why I was so quiet the whole time. So, we're a top pro bono law firm. We're going to represent the fish tank, and we're going to represent the future Hall of Famer properly through that. So that we're going to make sure that happens. So, so bankruptcy law is changing significantly. We've seen Chapter 11 change over the past couple of years. There's a Subchapter 5. So unfortunately, small businesses obviously got destroyed during COVID, and we're still seeing the fallout from that. So I believe that you're going to see the Chapter 11 system change significantly, especially for small businesses over the next 5 years.
There you go. Perk, I know you've been holding one.
Oh, geez, there it is.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, you know this condo, man. So let me ask you something, Chad, because I think I understand this correctly. With the new condo law since Surfside, I think there was an amendment that there was a situation where if you're doing one of these inspections for the building that needs their 40, 50, 60-year inspection, you could do the inspection and then you could also bid on the work, which to me seems like a conflict of interest, because I think those two things should be separate, because you could tell us we need a bunch of work and then you could run up your tab and make more money. Do I have that right? And has that been amended? And is that fair in your opinion? I think the way it is, you just have to disclose now.
Yeah, man. Journalists are just like lawyers, man. They know how to dig in and find that fine print. Unfortunately, that is the law. And these condo associations, they're kind of like Roger Goodell, man. They roll with an iron fist, right? And when you appeal, it comes back to them. So no, you nailed it. Anybody that has control, power, money always finds those loopholes to keep that control, power, and money. And I think that's what we see with these condos. And unfortunately, it's a shame, because as we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, there's so many people that are living in condos that have fixed income. And I know that you're a multimillionaire, you're a legend, so you're not worried about that. But we have people on fixed incomes that unfortunately have to move out of a condo where they've been for decades because they just can't afford these assessments that are coming up. So I'm glad you're bringing attention to that, because that's a real issue.
Hey, and let me ask you this, Chad. So in our condo, we're trying to increase the board from 3 to 5 members, and they've asked me to join the board. Chad, I've been to our board meetings and always say I love my neighbors till I go to that board meeting and they're yelling at each other and screaming and cussing, and I'm like, man, I didn't know you were such a damn idiot. I should stay away from the board, right? Or should I get on there and try to wield some power? What's the best solution?
Run. Just run. Run. Unless it's a paid position that everybody votes on and it's a number that's worth it to you, run, because you are just going to be hated.
Right. That's what I think. That's what my neighbors like me right now. I want to keep it that way. Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
That's probably a good idea. All right, I just saw it and I lost it in the chat. We had another question. I think it was Riley. Okay, what happens to your credit score after filing for bankruptcy, and how long does it take to recover?
Man, I was in court today, and I had a bunch of appointments today, and the number one thing people come in and they say, man, I don't want to file bankruptcy because my credit score is going to take a hit. So I say, well, pull up your credit score. What is it? Well, 400. So I'm like, you can't go much lower. Actually, I had a client today. I've never seen this before. I pulled up their credit score. It said NA. It wouldn't even give them a credit score. It said NA. I've never seen it before in my life. I have to look into that one. So sometimes the best thing you can do for your credit score is file bankruptcy, because it takes about 12 to 18 months to rebuild your credit afterwards. And if you have poor credit, which most people that are going through debt issues, unfortunately, they already have the poor credit. The only way to get out of that poor credit is by getting rid of the debt. So how do you get rid of the debt? You either pay it or you file bankruptcy, find a way out of it. So actually, the best thing you can do sometimes for your credit is file for bankruptcy.
What if it's the
Hey,
reverse,
Chad, if you,
Oh,
I've
go ahead.
heard that if you file for bankruptcy, I know, I don't mean to. I'm
Chris,
running
this is
this
your
minute
favorite
into the
segment.
pitch.
Perk is only
I-
here for this
I-
segment. He
I-
deals with the rest of the show.
I've heard that if you file for bankruptcy, it stays on your record for 7 years. Is there any truth to that?
You know where the 7 years comes from, actually? Does anybody on here know where the 7 years comes from?
I thought when you swallowed gum, it stayed in your system for 7 years.
Bro.
That's what they told us.
Wait, when you break a mirror, isn't that 7 years bad luck?
Hey, there's one.
That's
that one too.
Man, you guys, I thought we had some well-studied guys who 7 years is actually biblical, believe it or not.
No.
And that's what the bankruptcy code is. You forgive the debtors every 7 years. And so, if when you go to church, you say it over and over again, sometimes in different ways. But so that's where the 7 years comes from. You could receive a discharge every 8 years. The Chapter 7 discharge is on your credit for 10 years. But again, you're rebuilding credit. So if you need to get a mortgage, generally speaking, it's about 18 to 24 months. FHA mortgages are 24 months. So at 12 to 18 months, if the rest of your financial profile is in good shape, that's when your credit's going to come back.
Sorry, I do have a follow-up question, but Sam says Chad needs to start billing Perk. You got to put you on a pitch count. Oh, that's
Man, I'm sending an invoice. I know where he lives now. So
he paid for this. He paid for this advice with the first 58 minutes of this interview. That's what he did. So you said if people have a really poor credit score, that filing bankruptcy may actually be the best thing for them. But what about those people that have been, and I'm not projecting this on people who don't have a great credit score, but some people are fighting their tail off and they're paying their minimum bill and they never can get out of credit card debt, and they've got good credit, like they've got a 700 plus credit score, right? But they can't get just because they can't chase down that 19-20% or whatever it is. That's almost like a harder decision for them, right? Because they've got a good credit score. What does it look like for somebody in that position?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I run into that all the time. And believe it or not, the credit score is somewhat of a scam. I'm going to throw that out there because it might say you have a 700 or 720, but when you go out to borrow, they're going to look at your debt to income ratio and they're going to see you don't have any money left over to pay anything. Right. So you're still not going to get approved, even if you've never missed a payment. You had great credit for your entire life. So you're still not going to get approved, because the reason we care or should care about our credit score, and there's some ego and pride in it. I mean, we all have that. But the reason we should care is, like, what can it do for us? Can it get us a lower interest rate on our credit cards? Can it get us a lower interest rate on car? Can it get us the best mortgage? And that's how most of us use our credit score. Right. And sometimes you'll see that 720, but you go to the bank and you say, but I have a 720 credit score. They're like, yeah, but you can't afford this, so we're not going to lend you any money.
Wow.
Because they say, so what? So basically, you got to get out of that rat race, because it's the bank's favorite people are the ones that never pay off their debt, because they're just paying interest over and over and over.
Yeah.
And so the bank's just making an infinite return because the debt never gets paid off.
Yeah, shit. 7 years is nothing, I guess, compared to that situation. All right, one last question here from Maria. What's the biggest relief you see clients feel once they file for bankruptcy?
It's not only when they file, it's right after our meeting. You can really see the relief set in, the sleep get better, the relationship with their family and friends get better, because truly this is something they're carrying with them 24/7. And it's something that's not always acceptable to talk about, and even talk about with your friends and family. I had a couple in here one time where they didn't even realize each of them had so much debt until they sat down with me and we spoke about it, and we laid out the plan to get out of it. So I always tell my clients, the worst thing, and the Dolphins fans are going through it right now, is to live without hope, right? Right. Dolphins fans right now after week 1, they're like, we lost to Daniel Jones. How much worse can it get, right?
Yeah, you didn't have to make it that relatable, man.
Oh, so sorry. But truly, that's it. And life can change. Like we have a big week next week with this coming week, actually, and they win the game, and all of a sudden they're going to the Super Bowl again, and we have hope, right? And that's the same thing when people come to the office, they're like, man, my life is over. This is terrible. There's no way I'm going to rebuild. And you lay out the plan, and you lay out the strategy, and they're like, wait a second, okay, now I can actually rebuild, and I'm going to work a little bit harder, because people give up sometimes when they're like, if I work harder, all the money just goes to interest anyway. I can't build anything. It's not going to help me. It's not going to help my family. But when I say, your money is going to stay your money moving forward, that's the big thing. And truly, you just see their health and their energy just completely change. And I know it's a bad analysis, but you definitely see that with sports fans as well. And
no, I mean, it was actually a really good one. It just it hit too close to home. That's what it was. Well, he is Chad Van Horn. If you have more questions, or you want to talk to him about these services, or find yourself in that situation, it's vanhornlawgroup.com. Is that right, Chad? So you can visit vanhornlawgroup.com. And Chad's just a great dude, as you can see here in the fish tank. Speaking of great dudes, can we give it up for our guy, Mark Clayton, who should be in the Hall of Fame? We all agree. Mark Clayton filling in for OJ McDuffie. Juice was beside himself. He couldn't handle it, could not show up for the live. Clayton said, I got your back, Juice. We appreciate you, man.
Hey, man, I certainly appreciate you all inviting me in, man. Anytime, any place, you just let me know, man. I'll be more than happy to come on dive into the fish tank.
Be careful what you wish for, Mark. We definitely take you up on that. Okay. Shout out to Chris Perkins. Perk, we know that speaking of legal issues, there might be a little contractual conversation that has to happen after this to see if we can get you back on this show at some point. But we've enjoyed having you these first 3 episodes. We hope we get to see you again soon. Chris Perkins, Sun Sentinel, and even though he does say thanks for diving in, or let's dive in. Go check him out at the Dolphins Deep Dive with Perk. Clayton has something else to say.
One more, man. Hey, Seth, man, I appreciate everything you're doing, man. Everything you're doing. I couldn't say thank you enough, man, because, you've been my number one guy out there pushing forward, man, and I appreciate all your efforts, man. Thanks.
Well, I think the world of you, man, but I wouldn't push that hard if I didn't believe it. And like I'm like pissed off. I got it. This is no disrespect to Sterling Sharp. Congrats to him. He did amazing things in a very short career. But I'm like, if Sterling Sharp is in the Hall of Fame and Mark Clayton isn't, I am now pissed off. And then I started digging into it, and I'm like, man. So anyway, I already went through it. I put a video out, 4 reasons why Mark Clayton should be in the Hall of Fame. Go check it out on our YouTube channel. I feel very strongly that this man deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. So I do hope it happens soon. So, you're very welcome for that. If you get a chance, go check us out. We just had an episode with Ron Heller, the former right tackle for the Dolphins from 93 to 95. Really fun episode. So check that out. It's not on YouTube yet, but you certainly can listen to it on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. Tank cleaning. Our guy Savak just dropped his first in a new series. Are we going to get a new tank cleaning episode here soon, Savak?
Yeah, we should. Absolutely. We're looking at Ted Ginn Jr.
You're going to clean the tank and review the Ted Ginn Jr. episode. So Savak has his new series, Tank Cleaning. And then we are dropping on Tuesday a new episode that's another part of this phase 4 with the fish tank. It is Sharks Among Dolphins. And so actually I'll say it right here first. Sharks Among Dolphins, where we're going to talk to some nemesis, some people that maybe drove us crazy as Dolphin fans, but had great games or great careers against the Dolphins, but are still great guys. We just had an amazing conversation with Fred Taylor, the great Jacksonville Jaguar, who now is a rock star on the pivot with that incredible podcast. So Tuesday, you can check out Sharks Among Dolphins. We'll have that episode, and we'll be right back here on Wednesday, and we'll see who shows up. I don't know if we're going to have Perk. He already bailed on us. I think he got that call that he's gone overtime.
Yep.
I don't know if we'll have Perk, but hopefully we'll have somebody. Mark is always welcome to come in, and maybe we get Juice back. If we can get a dub, maybe we'll get Juice back here in the live. Jordan Poyer on the pod.
Must be nice to have such incredible depth.
Let me tell you what's great about this. We got 2 stand-up comedians, like actual stand-up comedians in the chat, and it is the best part of this whole damn thing. Will Fuller on the pod, all those Sharks. You guys are the best. Appreciate everybody. Thanks for diving in. I'll say that for Juice. We'll catch you guys soon.